Hey, Tim Frisch with A Frisch Perspective here. A lot of you have probably heard about this recent story that broke. This news report from NPR says Supreme Court says New York can't limit attendance in houses of worship due to COVID. This is dated November 26, 2020. So this is really good news for those who are in support and want to defend religious liberty and protect the First Amendment rights of our Constitution. And it really ties into what I've been talking about with Pastor John MacArthur, Grace Community Church, Pastor Rob McCoy of Godspeed Calvary Chapel, as well as other churches that have chosen to remain open and conduct indoor worship services throughout the time of the pandemic. Now, of course, there's been a lot of pushback of that, and previously the Supreme Court actually said that they were more in favor of what the states were saying and giving leeway for governors and state officials to put restrictions on places like churches for the health and safety of the public. But as you can see, there's a shift here. So we'll talk more about this. Before we do, I just want to remind you that if you haven't subscribed to my channel and you like Christian nerdy content like this, make sure you subscribe and hit the bell notification so that you know when I upload new content. So let's look at this article here. It says the Supreme Court has temporarily barred New York from enforcing strict attendance limits on places of worship in areas designated coronavirus hotspots in a decision released just before midnight on Wednesday. So this took place last week as I'm recording this. The decision marked a major shift for the court, in essence at least a partial reversal of previous rulings, as well as a clear indication of the court's dramatic move to the right with the addition of new Justice Amy Coney Barrett in place of the late Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg. So the article is already bringing out that there's really a shift here, as I mentioned. Before, the court leaned a certain way, really more in favor of the government and protecting what the government was trying to do. Now we see a shift in a new direction with Amy Coney Barrett on the court. So that's a really interesting development. Earlier this year, while Ginsburg was still on the court, it was Chief Justice John Roberts who cast the critical fifth vote to uphold a similar order from governors in California and Nevada. This time, Roberts was in the minority, noting that the New York rules at issue in the case had already been eased. The newly constituted majority, however, rejected Roberts' deferential approach, noting that New York could impose the strict orders again at any time. So the concern of the court now isn't with what happened in the past, but that the governor of New York, Cuomo, could actually reinstitute very tight restrictions on entities like places of worship. The restrictions at issue here, by effectively barring many from attending religious services, strike at the very heart of the First Amendment's guarantee of religious liberty, the unsigned majority decision said. Even in a pandemic, the Constitution cannot be put away and forgotten. So it really is an issue of balancing out what the government is trying to do to protect the health and safety of the public with our rights that we have granted to us in the Constitution. The New York rules imposed by Governor Andrew Cuomo restricted attendance at religious services in areas classified as red or orange zones. In red zones, no more than 10 people were permitted to attend each service, and in orange zones, attendance was capped at 25. Those rules, which the court majority found to be severe and inflexible, did not apply to retail stores in the same neighborhoods, the decision said. In an orange zone, where secular businesses are subject to no attendance cap at all, the discrimination was even starker, the court said. The justices in the majority, in addition to Barrett, were Justices Samuel Alito, Clarence Thomas, Brett Kavanaugh, and Neil Gorsuch. So you can see that the court really has shifted now, actually 5-4 in its decision here. Before, the decisions were 5-4 the other way, more leaning toward the government's prerogative. Now we see it leaning more toward the religious institution's prerogative. Gorsuch filed an unusually acerbic concurring opinion blasting not only Governor Cuomo, but also Chief Justice Roberts for his earlier opinion in the California and Nevada cases. Referring to the more lax rules for New York retailers, Gorsuch opined that at least according to Governor Cuomo, it may be unsafe to go to church, but it is always fine to pick up another bottle of wine, shop for a new bike, or spend the afternoon exploring your distal points and meridians, a reference to acupuncture being unregulated. And when it came to Roberts, Gorsuch spent several pages accusing him of rewriting history in his dissenting opinion on Wednesday and his earlier opinions in the California and Nevada cases. In the end, said Gorsuch, while Roberts and the other dissenters may wish to stay out of the way and let state officials and experts deal with the crisis of a pandemic, we may not shelter in place where the Constitution is under attack. There is, he wrote, no world in which the Constitution tolerates color-coded executive edicts that reopen liquor stores and bike shops, but shutter churches, synagogues, and mosques. So you can see Gorsuch there is really coming out strongly in protection of religious liberty and the rights that are granted in the Constitution of the United States. And that's really good news. So getting back to how this ties into Pastor John MacArthur of Grace Community Church, a situation that I've covered a lot, as well as other churches in California and other places in the country. This indicates to us that there is a shift in the Supreme Court, and that if churches' situations like Grace Community Church ever did make it to the Supreme Court, this is really good news for them. Now, it may be that the case that the Supreme Court is looking at here, if this comes back to them and they make an official signed decision, maybe that would have bearing already on cases like Grace Community Church. But the point is, we can really see that the Supreme Court is evidencing a desire to protect the First Amendment rights that churches and places of worship have in the Constitution. So that's really good news for churches. And I have to say, I know that we're always trying to balance out the issue of the safety of the public during this time with the spread of the coronavirus. And it's coming to a head again because there's more COVID cases. They are on the rise right now. So, of course, people are very concerned. But the point is, there is a balance that has to be achieved. And it's easy for us as humans, I think, to err on the side of being overprotective. Although I understand we do need to be careful and take precautions when it's necessary. But I always say that the numbers have to back up the precautions that we're taking. And that's not just the number of cases, but also how deadly is the disease itself and who are the most vulnerable people in our population. So are our measures matching the actual risks that we're facing? So that's what we always have to keep in mind. But at the same time, what the Supreme Court is saying here is that even with the threat to our health, we do have First Amendment protections, and we need to make sure that we uphold those rights that are given to us in the Constitution. So very good news to see this. I know a lot of you probably heard about this and were excited. This is not only good for this specific case, but also for cases that we're talking about in other states like California. I'd love to hear what you think about all of this. Just make sure you keep your conversation in the comments section positive and edifying. But thank you so much for listening to some of my thoughts from A Frisch Perspective.